This episode of From Angel to Exit is brought to you by the CEO's Right Hand. The CEO's Right Hand provides customized outsourced finance, accounting, and human resource services tailored to small and medium-sized businesses. Their services include fractional CFO, HR support, capital raising, and financial infrastructure development. They emphasize personalized engagements and expert support to drive growth and operational efficiencies. If you want to find out more, visit theceosrighthand.co. Now, let's get on with our episode. Are you serious about planning a successful business exit? From Angel to Exit is your go-to resource. Subscribe to our newsletter at eckfeldt.com/podcast for even more valuable insights. And to get personalized guidance, take our free exit readiness assessment. It's just 24 questions, and it will give you a clear picture of your exit readiness. Find the assessment at eckfeldt.com/exit. Submit your results, and we'll schedule a free follow-up call to discuss your specific situation and the best way to maximize your valuation and ensure a successful transaction. Now, back to the episode. Welcome, everyone. This is From Angel to Exit. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Our guest today is Joshua Maidan. He is an entrepreneur. He's an investor. We're going to hear about a couple of his stories around getting involved in companies, running companies, growing companies, scaling them, exiting them. Some of his takeaways, some of his learnings. Joshua's really interesting kind of background and has some really interesting experiences. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say, hear his takeaways, and hear his stories. So with all that, Joshua, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Before we get into the entrepreneurial experiences and some of the investing and stuff you're doing, I'd love to get a little background, a little personal story, business story. Like, how did you get into the space? What was the history?
Sure. So I do a lot of private equity deals, a lot of real estate, but I've also been involved with brands, buying, building, selling brands. And I really got into this via an opportunity I saw walking around Brooklyn, New York, where I saw boutique coffee shops selling $6-7 coffees, and
the math in your head was just too good to pass up.
Pretty much. I knew somebody who was in the business in Colombia, where partially I grew up.
Okay.
And at the beginning, I wanted to do a distribution, and ended up just partnering for the whole business. I moved back to Colombia. I really got knee deep into fixing everything that was there and creating an operation to bring to the United States, New York specifically.
Yep.
And we were successful, and then, grew the company and sold it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, was becoming, getting involved in businesses, investing, entrepreneurship, growth, was that something you've always wanted to do? I mean, were you, in kindergarten, talking about how you wanted to own a business someday? Or what was your background with business ownership and entrepreneurialism?
I don't think it was something that was in my plans. I think I kind of stumbled into it and just went with it, really, and kept growing from that. And even the following business kind of all spiraled from it a bit. Now I'm just incorporating a little bit of more real estate background into an operational business, but I don't know. I kind of look at opportunities as they come.
Yeah, it's sort of a combination of having a little strategy and then a lot of kind of fortuitous, what are the opportunities in front of me. So tell us more about the coffee business in terms of, you saw this opportunity and the rise. I guess, did you see this as a trend? Like, you just saw all these coffee shops coming up, people spending this kind of money on coffee, like, hey, there's an opportunity here. I mean, how much of this was seeing the trend, and how much of it was like, hey, I've got unique opportunity with some relationships I have in terms of being able to source coffee?
So there definitely was a trend. I did see that there was, which is what now is called the third wave of coffee, which is the boutique world, specialty coffee, should I say. And I saw an opportunity where I had the connections to really source the coffee directly. And we were able to create an experience that didn't exist at the time, which was the way that we were shipping coffee by air, and the time that it would take us from the farm all the way to the coffee.
Wait, and what was the like other companies, other coffee brands were? How are they doing it? Like, what was the innovation that you saw?
So about I would say 99.9% of retail coffee shops,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to see a freshly roasted stamp on it, and it
Mm-hmm.
might say freshly roasted, a couple of weeks ago, but that coffee has been harvested at least a year ago.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
and coffee has changes of state depending on the different processes it has, and it loses consistency because it
Mm-hmm.
loses weight because you're taking away the shell and then you're drying it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're taking another parchment, and once that last piece of the puzzle, which is the parchment, before it gets milled into green state, that's the first contact the coffee gets with oxidation,
Okay.
and you start losing the taste. So we adapted a process used by flowers because it's a very perishable product
Yeah.
that they ship by air. Pretty much everybody else they ships by sea. So they send the green coffee in a container, but they're also sourced through distribution companies. We were sourcing directly from the farmers.
Got it.
So we would do from farm to cup in between, I would say, 10 days to a month.
Wow. And how did that change the experience or the taste of the coffee?
Definitely, there was more consistency. Think of any product that you consume in your household. Just with more time, you start losing taste. So that's a very easy comparison to coffee. So the taste was very good.
Yeah.
We obviously there's much more than just the coffee.
Yeah.
There's the infrastructure. There's the design, the branding, marketing. So we invested a lot into all these different spaces to really create a full experience that resonated, and we were able to position ourselves very well in New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the brand, because you mentioned brands. How, I guess, what was your experience in building brands? How did that apply to the early stages of this company? And then how did you, like, where did you see the brand kind of positioning given all the coffee, retail coffee shops that were coming up in the area?
So I think this really came from a general consensus in business where, let's say if you're concentrating on retail, brand is the big aspect. That's really where everything is, and
Yeah.
you see where consumers they spend their money is in that brand recognition, right? So you look at all these luxury brands. Maybe the cost is really minimal, but you're not buying the cost; you're buying the brand. So that's where really we knew where the focus had to be. We did a really big rebranding process where the company was actually called Devotion. And we hired a very cool company here in New York that really, they came to us and said, you know what, you got to change it to Spanish. It's a Colombian company. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And we went for it, and we had a couple of concepts that we want to work with, especially for the retail experience, and it all came out great.
Yeah. Now, did you have retail locations already picked out, or was that finding actual locations a big part of the lift?
No, we didn't. So we had the idea. I moved back to Colombia, and I focused really on the infrastructure and the branding. Just make sure that whatever we're going to be presenting to New York was, you have a one-time opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a bullseye. So that was really my focus for about 2 years.
Okay.
And then from my real estate background, we just started looking at spaces. We were actually going to purchase a space and lease it. And luckily, that didn't happen.
Why luckily?
Well, it was a great place in Clinton Hill. The traffic for retail, wasn't optimal. It was good. But the focus was more on the roaster, right? And that deal fell through, and everything was moving. There was a lot of pressure, so I just got on a car and started moving around. And I passed by a retail space that was empty, which was in an area that I knew what was happening in the area. It's right around the corner from the Domino Factory project, which is the Two Trees project. And I knew how many apartments were coming up I knew what was happening with the area,
Mm-hmm.
and the timing was great, and it worked out.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the, getting the operances right, getting the retail store location up and running. Like, what were some of the challenges that you had to get through?
So I think, and I guess this comes from the training I got from my family that's heavily involved in manufacturing,
Okay.
where you really have to think about every little step of the process. But it really starts with, and this is a huge oversight in businesses, all the way to multinational sometimes, which is the corporate governance, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was about, and which really was the decision for me to exit, right?
Yeah.
So that's one side of it, which I think is very important. And I think if there's a takeaway from this talk that we're having is really how important corporate governance is, and making sure the partners are completely aligned, I think is number one. So I would put that at number one, right? So
before you didn't.
no, I knew my ex-partner, and we said, we'll work through it.
Yeah.
And when we got to it, and we started seeing that there was a lot of differences in where we wanted to take this and what I wanted out of it, then that was the decision for me to exit.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll dig into this one because I had a similar personal story where everything starts on good terms, right? And in fact, I think everyone goes with an initial alignment. The problem is, life happens, right? And things change over time. So trying to keep that alignment can be difficult. But so I could maybe give us a little bit of the sense of the structure going into it. Like, you had a partner. What was the current situation? How did you get involved? What was the kind of ownership structure that you started with?
So it's pretty simple. It was just a straight up partnership,
Okay.
where we shared the equity.
Okay.
It was personal investment, so we didn't really have to deal with investors at the time.
Okay. What did you own? I guess was this the facility in Colombia, the retail location, IP? What were the actual assets in the start?
So mainly it was that there was a processing plant in Colombia,
Okay.
a smaller processing plant in Colombia, with a roaster, a small roaster, and and the IP. So, and there was some brand recognition in Colombia.
Okay.
They didn't really do a lot of exports. It was more of a future cash flow valuation that I did.
Okay.
And just opportunity. I knew the numbers in New York specifically, which is where the first retail location was set to open. So I underwrote the business really in that sense.
Okay. And how did that grow or change? I mean, did you take on investors eventually, or how did you capitalize the retail location expansion?
No, it was all done. So so we were going to capitalize the business for the investment of the expansion.
Okay. And what were those plans like?
So fortuitously, everything pretty much happened according to plan. There was a shift here and there. I think the main thing was that the brand was ready to operate in the United States, because it's the way you operate in Colombia is not the way that you operate in the United States. You can get away with a lot of things in Colombia, where here, I mean, your competition is the best and the latest, right?
Yeah.
And they're all very well capitalized. So that was my first task, really, was number one, understand the operation, understand the processes, and I did a really deep dive into all the systems. I implemented SAP ERP system. We immediately started creating processes for every little task that was at hand, all the different departments. Then we invested in a larger processing plant where we bought a parchment mill, so we can have the in-house process of the parchment mill alongside with the roaster. And parallel to that, we started working on the brand. What's it going to look like? What's the retail location going to be? What's the experience that we want? And at that time, we started talking about the distribution and how we were going to do it. And we had this idea to kind of change the way coffee was being distributed all over the world. And me being the crazy minded guy, I just went to the FedEx offices, started knocking on the doors. Hey, I got this crazy idea. And I was able to get them on board. They gave me multinational rates. We did a case study with them, which like in the first month had like 160,000 views in YouTube.
Wow.
And we went for it, and we opened up in New York, and it went great. First year, it got voted by the Village Voice as best coffee shop in New York.
Wow.
It's still in Architectural Digest as the best designed coffee shop in New York and in the country. So
kudos.
Did really well.
Yeah. What was the original plan? Like, where did you hope to get to in terms of size or locations or impact? Like, what were your kind of plans initially?
So for me, I always see the businesses that I take a part in, and I look at it very aggressively. And I don't know if that's correct or not, but I was seeing a couple of the competitions and what they were doing and the level of investments that were being poured into them. And that's where I wanted to take the company, because I was very aware that retail is a very cash intensive business, and you have to be aggressive, and it's about replicating that business model as many times as you can. So I was really, my aim was on a very aggressive US expansion. And I guess that's where my partners and we had a little bit of a different vision.
Yeah.
They were a bit shy on that aggressivity.
Got it. Yeah. What, I guess as you started to kind of realize that you had some difference of opinion, like how did that come up, and how did you initially kind of navigate it? Like, what was it right away it became an issue, or was it something that was a slow build and kind of became more of an issue over time?
It was a slow build.
Yeah.
I think everything started coming up because one of the things that I've been pushing for was to start a board of directors, which there was no board of directors, and have also outside participants, just to have a different point of view. And that's when, again, we were dealing with strategy.
Yeah.
And we started to see the differences, and we hired a company that came and we did a couple of sessions to really build corporate governance. And that's when the issues started coming up on the differences of where we wanted to take it and how we wanted to take it, especially bringing in outside investors instead of our own capital.
And so I guess why do the board? I mean, give us a little more insight on why you wanted to get a board involved and what that really meant. And for companies that don't have a board or haven't thought about a board, like, what does it mean and what did it mean to you?
So for me, the way I see business in general is I think it doesn't matter what size it is. And there's different stages that you need different elements to manage the business. But I feel that all businesses you have to treat like if they're a massive corporation, right?
Okay.
And think of the processes and think of how you make decisions, right?
Yeah.
So and that's why I think the first focus one should have is really on corporate governance, which is understanding not only what a strategy is, but how are you going to make decisions from partners all the way to management, all the way to just employees.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not about a hierarchy, but it's just a way of how you make decisions. And so I wanted to create an entity that would take away the day-to-day decisions, right, which my partner and I were doing at the time, and start thinking of strategy, start thinking big picture, right? Which is very different conversations that you have day-to-day where you're just dealing with, whatever
orders and customers and operations.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to me, that was a very important piece of the puzzle is just to separate that day-to-day business and think much big picture strategy, big decisions, and that's why we decided to start the board.
Mm-hmm. And I guess what was your anticipation or plan in terms of an exit when you first started? I mean, did you have hey, look, we want to scale this a certain amount to 5 years or 10 years, and then we want to take this public, or we want to get acquired, or I mean, do you have particular visions or plans about how you were going to exit the business?
I had a very clear vision.
Okay.
And I was always very vocal about the vision. And I guess my partner played along with it at the time. You know, okay, sounds good, sounds nice, let's do it. Again, like I said a couple of minutes back, I was very clear that it's a very capital intensive business, especially opening up retail, rents and deposits, and you need a lot of cash flow. You need that muscle build outs, right? Yeah. So, and again, I was seeing and two companies in particular. One was Blue Bottle, the other one was Intelligentsia. And I did a lot of research on them and how much money they were getting from investors. So what I really wanted was that to open up seed investors and start growing from that and building our valuation really very aggressively. And eventually somebody's going to come up and give us the valuation that we want, and move on to the next business.
Yeah. And
from my partner was a little bit different because it was his, let's say, brainchild, little baby.
Yeah, I'm curious on that. I mean, you were coming in to an existing entity and doing a fair amount of transformation and then scaling. For your partner, it sounds like there was an attachment there, I guess, that was different for you. I guess, when did you first realize that, or when did that first start coming up?
When we finished corporate governance, the workshop that we were doing, and it was very clear to me that there was a difference in the outcome that we wanted, and it was a simpler decision for me to exit at that point. Yeah. Luckily, the business was doing well, and the brand recognition was great, so that worked out pretty good.
So I see cases like this where you've got partners, and then you've got this that there's a riff or there's some kind of difference of opinion. But it isn't always easy to exit these things or figure out a valuation or have people buy people out. I mean, do you feel? I mean, it sounds like your case was reasonably fortunate in that it was going well. How did you actually do the exit? Like, what were the mechanics of how you got out of the business?
I was very clear. We hired a third party to come in and give us a valuation at the time, which was agreed upon, right, by a third-party investment bank that
But that was that process in your operating agreement, or in your partnership agreement?
So, yes and no.
Okay.
So we had an initial operating agreement that we were going to work on. That took a wrong turn, and then we modified it and implemented a exit strategy into that new operating agreement, and that's how we went about it.
Got it. So do you feel like the operating agreement served you well in terms of dealing with this situation, or would there were changes you wish you had made to the operating agreement?
So I wish we would have had this a little bit clearer all the way from the beginning. I think I might have had maybe a little bit more leverage at the time, but it went on all right because at the end of the day, a third party came and gave us the valuation, and we had a couple of points where we could have rebutted, but it came out fine.
Yeah, you got through it.
Yeah.
What I guess, where did it leave you? Right, like, were you feel like you were made whole and you were happy with the way things turned out and ready to go on to the next thing? Was there disappointment? I mean, these are big changes for people.
So, I guess the process was a little bit difficult because it's consuming, right? Going through evaluations, and you spend a lot of time just going through due diligence and really getting it to that point. right? Where, and again, I'm going to go back to this corporate governance
Yeah.
all the time, because I think these are things that you can already put in place. And let's say the businesses that I started after this company, I mean, and that's the first step that I do, and it's already mapped out. I already have my exit mapped out, so it's very clear. You know, because look, there's all different sorts of exits. What if you just wake up one day and you say, I want to leave?
Yeah.
How do you leave? Right? So those are questions that people don't ask themselves at the beginning, or even in smaller companies, that I think are crucial, that you have to ask yourself, you know, am I going to be here forever? You know, are our visions aligned? Or, you know, even if they're aligned, where are their differences? And what happens if life changes and you never know, or you want to move, or there's so many variables. So, you know, and now I work all the way to succession, which I think is a key element in corporate governance that gets overlooked very easily. And even to very difficult conversations like death. What happens if, you know, a partner dies? How do you deal with it?
Yep. So, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty thorough on this stuff now. I mean, most companies, I would say, are not. I don't know what your experience is in kind of the general population of companies.
I would say most are not.
And why? Like, why do you think they're not? Like, what's the, like, what do you think the hindrances are for most early stage companies around, you know, thinking about and talking about and actually documenting some of these things?
I really think that it's about, they don't see the importance of it, right? And let's say a lot of the old timers, their philosophy, especially with succession, is like, when it's my kids, let them deal with it. And I think that's the worst kind of strategy to go about. I think I learned a lot also from my wife's family, who's very organized, and you know, they have their family protocol and just how you work. It's so important to really think of these things, and I've seen the outcome after this business in doing this, and it's been fantastic. Like, especially the next company that I bought, grew and sold. It was seamless.
Served you well.
We had absolutely no issues. The board meeting when we got the offer was quick. Everything went, you know, very smooth, because all these topics were ironed out at the beginning. Yeah.
And I guess, what are some of those topics, and how do you have particular strategies for dealing some of this stuff? Like when you've got, just difference of opinion, we've got life events, you know, unfortunate demise of partners, things like that. Like, is there anything that you've kind of figured out how to make these, you know, workable, but also not overly complicated for implementing? Because I have seen the other case, which is, these work operating agreements become so crazy, and people like have all this like put call options and have to get insurance, and they buy all these, like, it can be onerous for an early stage company. Is there anything you've figured out to kind of make this reasonable?
So one thing, and it was a great takeaway from the workshop I did from corporate governance, which is, I guess, dividing that corporate governance in a couple of areas. I guess the first area is rights to shareholders. Right? So you focus, what are the rights to shareholders? Major decision rights, buy, sell, if there's any right of first refusal or tag along, drag along, succession, who do you sell, how can you sell, just those types of options. Then are the options, the rights reserved for a board of directors, because I do think it's important. It doesn't matter how large or small you have, but you have to have, even if it's an advisory board, something outside the day-to-day that you can discuss strategy on a much larger level. It's just so positive for a business, right? To be able to have this output on just a macro level. Yeah. So it's what rights are reserved to that, let's call it board, what they can decide, how are they going to be a bridge towards management. And then there's management, so and hiring, right? Who can be what? Like what are can anybody be a manager? Can anybody work? Can partners work? Can they not work? Who is a part of the business? Contracts on upper management. And the last one, which is really the most difficult part, where you have to talk about a lot of negative scenarios, are conflict resolutions, right? So how do you deal with a conflict, right? If there is a dispute or some sort of position where, the last thing you want to end up is in litigation, right?
Yeah.
So, do you work with mediator? Is there a cool down period? Which I think is positive. You put a 2-week cool down period.
Yep.
And let's say on a good scenario is also that whole exit strategy. Like, how do I exit, right? And so you ask your questions. What are the mechanisms for me to exit? How do I value the company, right? Do I want to just make up numbers, or do we hire a third party, right? So I think all those points are very important just to think of when you're starting any partnership, right? Or even when you're in a partnership or a business and you're developing it, to put a pause and work on it. Because if you look at the most successful companies, the most successful families in the world, they have a very strong corporate governance, right? And you even look at succession, which is, again, something that's so overlooked, right? And at different levels. It can be at the beginning, or it can be all the way at the end. But you look at all these big multinational or tech companies that are now thinking of succession. I'll give you a perfect one. How do you follow up whoever's leading Apple? Who's the next guy? So that's very difficult. So you have to think of those things at the beginning, because you start a company and you're sweeping the floors. You're in sales. You're doing all this stuff. But do you want to do that forever? Is that the question that I think people have to ask themselves? Is, what position do you see yourself doing in, or how many roles do you want to be doing, and the allocation of time? So you have to think, who's going to take my job? And a philosophy that I use is I hire people so they come in 5 years and they fire me.
Yeah. I've kind of 2 areas that I would love to kind of get more insight on. One is kind of the board of directors versus board of advisors, and how do you deal with kind of fiduciary and then, actual control, or like what power do these entities have, and how does it relate to management and investors? Do you have any good sort of rules of thumb around how to set up the boards like this, either as directors or as advisors, and how you make the distinction between those and decide between those?
Of course. So I think the main distinction is really who votes and who doesn't. Generally, a board of directors will have votes on major decisions. And an advisory board really is just a support system for a board of director or for shareholders. So I see them very different, right? And I'll go to the less... the one that has less implications, which is a board of advisory, because generally there's no voting involved. It's more strategy and ideas, and it's kind of like a creative session that you bounce around strategy and what can we do, and you want. I think it's important in an advisory board to have very different profiles, right? Profiles that aren't in your toolbox to really help you. They
should sort of round out management in some way.
100%, right? Board of directors is a little bit different, because board of directors there's major decisions, and I'll give a great example. And if you ask me, Silicon Valley Bank, the reason that they failed is, if you look at their board of directors, there was one banker.
Yeah, exactly.
So how is a bank going to have a board of directors that has only one banker? There was like marketing and this and that and sales. Great, but it's a bank. So you need people that understand how to run whatever business that you're running. Yeah, right.
You should probably have a risk officer and like a whole bunch of other people.
When I was reading those articles, I couldn't believe it. I had to read more, because I did not believe it.
A little dumbfounding.
I couldn't. It was incredible. So, and that comes to corporate governance, which are what are the rules? Who can be in your board of directors, and that falls on the shareholders, because they have to set the rules and they have to set the tone, right? So of course, I mean, the bare basics, you need an uneven number, just for to make sure the
Voting
votes
purposes,
are correct. And depending on the equity structure for the shareholders, you see who has more equity, or if it's 50-50, then you give, let's say, 1 or 2 votes to each member, and then each one can bring another member, and then there's a third one
mutually decided,
that mutual or outside. I feel that it's important to pay board members because then they're committed to it. It's a job, right? So I think that's important. Doesn't matter if it's $100 or $1,000 or 10,000. Doesn't matter. I think it's just that commitment. You want people to be serious about it. If not, just do an advisory board. I think it's not as it doesn't carry as much weight as a board of directors.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask on the operating agreement. I run into this a lot, where you've got various kind of partners or owners in the business, but that may have very different operational involvement, right? So you have some people that are working full time in leadership roles. You may have somebody who's more in a management role. Then you have maybe people that are not operating in the business, but maybe they have some kind of sales or marketing or thought leadership role on a part-time basis. How do you kind of handle the kind of ownership versus contribution versus compensation kind of drama that can happen inside early stage companies?
So I think the most important piece of this puzzle is really understand, number one, what each role is, right? And what are the responsibilities? So I think transparency is number one. And just because somebody is, for example, a company that I invested in, I had equity in the deal. I wasn't doing day to day, but I had like a business development role where I would bring businesses, and that particular business, I was bringing in 15% of the sales of the company, right? And I did not have a day to day role. So it's really structuring. Let's say on this particular role where, let's say, it's not a day-to-day role. So, okay, what are my responsibilities? What are my limitations? And how do you utilize the other teams for the benefit of the company? At the end of the day, I think that should always be the number one philosophy, to make decisions that the company benefits from. Because if the company does well, everything else does well. Right.
Yeah, that cascades down.
So I think it's very important to take away that ego and put it aside. And it's not about the person. I don't even put names on positions. I put the position because it's about the position. It's about what the role is, what the responsibilities, what do you have to do, what do you want out of it, how much time are you going to put into it. And the good thing is that most of these things are very quantifiable. So I think it's about that. It's just put it on paper, start figuring out, okay, so time this, and you figure it out. It's ends up being kind of simple math.
Yeah. Any frequency in which you suggest that stuff kind of gets reviewed or updated? I mean, I've seen, companies, evolve quickly and scale quickly, and all of a sudden, it's 2 or 3 years later from the original kind of structure, and now things are really different, but now there's so much delta that that becomes an issue. What do you see, or what do you recommend in terms of reviewing these corporate governance documents?
So I think if you have a really solid corporate governance from the beginning, so I think the revisions will really come if you're bringing on new investors or you're bringing on new equity partners where things will change. But I think it's dependent on that corporate governance to attract investors into your business, because they're going to come and they see, I see how decisions are made, and it makes it much easier to bring on investors. I've had situations where I've been underwriting a business very recently, and I knew I could have killed it, but just the structure behind the business that
rat's nest,
a bit, and sure, they could have hired me, and I would have cost a ton of money to go, fix all their systems. But I decided just to shy away because the business itself wasn't really able to operate under these standards.
I
think it's a mindset. It's very important to have that mindset of processes, controls, and strategy,
Yeah. So for early stage companies or people that are just kind of starting companies and putting together some of this stuff, I mean, clearly corporate governance is a big one for you. What else do you recommend that a company does early in the process to make it easier to, do transactions, whether it's take on money, whether it's sell equity, whether it's exit, whether it's bringing on private equity, whatever kind of future deals? What else would you suggest they really think about and do early?
I think the most important is that clean business is the processes, right? A lot of people I call it like running without shoes, and then you start creating calluses, right? Yeah. Put the socks on, put the shoes on, spend time.
Tie your laces.
Tie your laces, and a lot of people overlook these little details.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a very quick, easy example. So I do cycles of business. So I say, okay, so I'm going to ship a package from here to there. Okay, so how do I get it packaged? What are the quality controls? And I put on a list. It could be a Word document, and I say, okay, for this process, to get it from point A to point B, I have to do all these things. And that's where I spend most time revising. So you have a process, and suddenly there's a delta, a variable, something happens. They're like, wait a minute, I got to go back to the drawing board. What happened? And rebuild that. We'll put a quality control here, put a blocker here. This didn't work. And build processes. I think that's the key. And of course, if you can automate the process with systems, that's the ultimate goal. Really, you're bound by cash flow at that point on what you can do. But there's a lot of very good tools and solutions that you can use just to organize yourself, to be very thorough. Project management, just be very organized. That's, I think, one of the elements that gets overlooked day to day. You get stuck in that grind of the day to day, and you're not putting a pause and organizing yourself and organizing your business. And if you want to exit, that's all people look at. Nobody wants to get in and fix things up. And I'll tell you from my experience, because I like to get involved in companies that need a little bit fixing, because sometimes you don't have the tools and you don't have the knowledge. So I have a sweet spot for something like that, but there has to be the willingness to be open to really, make impact change in your company, and spend time on all these processes. Even a CRM or a core ERP system, you need to spend time inputting data. That just doesn't do it by itself, and you need to figure things out, and you keep going, and that's what companies or investors look at, is how well and how fine-tuned is this operation, and the people behind it, and all the rules set in place. And when you have all those elements, it makes it much easier. That again, another company that I invested, it was like very smooth, because we had all these little pieces in place. So it was a simple transition. Yeah.
Joshua, this has been great. If people want to find out more information about you, the work that you're doing, what's the best way to get that?
I don't know, maybe LinkedIn?
Sure. I can make sure that your LinkedIn profile is on there. You're doing a lot of interesting work, so I'm encourage people to kind of check you out and see what you're working on. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Joshua. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you so much. Very enjoyed sharing the knowledge that I know, and hopefully other people could learn from it and benefit from it.